Hello, thanks for watching my second video, the second video I've ever made. Back when I first started thinking about making these videos, I thought I'd probably make one every day with each of Tucker Carlson's shows. Talk about the lies that he puts forth every day. And I thought, given that he lies every day, I'd pretty much never run out of content. Two problems with that. First of all, these videos take a lot longer than I thought they'd take to make, so I'm not going to be able to keep up with one a day. And I certainly won't be able to do his entire show. So just try and do the very first segment of his show. I thought, at least that'll give me some content. But I didn't realize this is the second show, and it's basically the same thing as the first. It's the same lies. I thought there's different enough to make a video. It was worth my time making it. I hope it's worth your time watching it. But essentially, his argument, or lack of argument as it may be, is the same thing. Democrats hate you. Democrats want to take your guns, and they want to enslave you. That's what he says here. It's basically 13 minutes of him lying about the true intentions of Democrats in Congress. It's really that simple. The question is, why? Why is he devoting a show, his show, to lying about the intentions of other people? It can't be that he wants to make the world a better place. It just can't, because if he were, he would take a legitimate argument that they're putting forward. Namely, in this segment, he's talking about the banning of AR-15 style weapons, and he would argue against the merits of that. And he'd say, here's their argument, here's why I'm against it. But that's not what he does. He lies about their intentions. Again, why? The only possible reason I can think for him doing that, ratings. It's to have a show. It's to make money. And I understand why he'd want to make money. I get that. Everybody wants to make some money, and hey, as I pointed out in the previous video, this is just an act for him. He's playing a character on TV. The bigger question I have is, why does anybody believe him? Why does he have an audience? For reasons I won't go into here, I spent the last 3 years or so hanging out on a Discord server where they debate flat Earth. I've watched for 3 years now allegedly sane people trying to convince flat earthers that the Earth is indeed a globe. I've watched them provide countless bits of evidence, including photos from space of the Earth, all to no avail. The flat earthers simply reject anything and everything that goes against what they want to believe, that the Earth is flat. The photos from space, they're fake. NASA, fake. The water curving around the end of the Earth, boats going with the horizon, the sun setting, an illusion. Carried out by whom? For what? For what purpose? It's always the question. What it comes down to essentially is that they think the world's lying to them. They need to believe, or they have some deep-seated need to believe, that somebody is lying to them, that somebody is out to get them. Fortunately for us, flat earthers are a small part of society. We don't really have to understand their delusion completely or understand completely what's going on with them. Carlson's audience, however, is a little bigger. They're still a minority, but they're bigger. And the question remains, why do they want to believe that we are evil? Why do they want to believe, or why do they need to believe even, that we are out to get them, that we want to enslave them, that we want to subjugate them? Because we don't. But they're still receptive to the argument that Carlson puts forward. Because if they weren't receptive to it, Carlson's lies would fall on deaf ears. The fact that they are so willing to believe that we are evil is a problem, though. Societies cannot exist when half of it just rejects wholesale the truth. When half of it makes up their own reality about what is happening in the real world. We can't share a country if you think that we are trying to enslave you. We can't share a democracy. We can't come together to solve the problems if you think our fundamental goal, our primary goal, is to somehow subjugate you all. I have no idea why you need to believe that. And if it is not because you've been told this, if you have some deeper-seated need to believe that you are in a battle, an epic battle, against evil in this world, the facts I present here, they won't convince you. I know that. I've watched it fail to convince people for 3 years with regard to flat Earth. Facts will never convince anybody who doesn't want to accept them. I understand that these videos may be an exercise in futility, but they're all I have. And so that's all I can give. Here we go.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. This is a Fox News alert. Facing almost certain defeat for his party in the midterm elections 5 months from now, Joe Biden has become desperate. He's decided to leverage the murder of 19 children in Texas last week for political advantage. He just spoke at some length from the White House about the need to disarm the population.
So let's get this straight. Biden is facing imminent defeat in November, and he's going to use a school shooting as a ruse to take guns away from Americans in order to get more votes for Democrats in November? Yeah. I know that makes absolutely no sense, but it doesn't have to. Making sense is not the goal. The three completely unrelated ideas stand on their own for their emotional value. Democrats are down in the polling. Yay! It shows the American people are wising up to how stupid the Democrats really are and how Carlson's audience was right all along. They're so much smarter than everybody else. Biden is desperate. Ooh, irrational, crazy. We already know he's senile. The old man probably won't survive his term. Biden's coming for your guns. Boo! Come and take them, asshole. Those three unconnected concepts strike all the right emotional chords. Joy, ridicule, fear. We have to remember that all this is scripted to put his audience in a particularly emotional state, not to make an argument, but to solely evoke emotions. That's why it doesn't need to make sense.
We're going to spare you all of it. We've taken a few select sound bites that sum up the president's message. Here they are.
And of course, the chances of Biden saying anything about disarming the population is zero. Tucker's just setting his audience up to hear something that, despite the fact that they're not going to hear it, are still going to believe that's what Biden said.
Second Amendment, like all other rights, is not absolute. This isn't about taking away anyone's rights. It's about protecting children. It's about protecting families. It's about protecting whole communities. It's about protecting our freedom to go to school, to a grocery store, to a church, without being shot and killed. We need to ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. And if we can't ban assault weapons, then we should raise the age to purchase them from 18 to 21. Strengthen background checks. Enact safe storage law and red flag laws. Repeal the immunity that protects gun manufacturers from liability. Address the mental health crisis, deepening the trauma of gun violence and as a consequence of that violence. These are rational, common sense measures. And if Congress fails, I believe this time a majority of the American people won't give up either. I believe the majority of you will act.
The irony here is that despite being able to edit Biden's 20-minute speech down to 40 seconds of sound bites, removing all context to anything the least bit controversial in order to make him look stupid, this is the best Carlson can do. Without Carlson coming on to tell his audience what they just heard, even Carlson's audience would look at that montage and think, okay, there's nothing controversial in there. And to nobody's surprise, Biden said absolutely nothing about disarming anybody. Yes, he expressed a desire to ban assault weapons, but he recognizes that's probably not going to happen. Therefore, he said we should just raise the age to acquire them. As Biden said, they seem like rational steps to me, and I'm guessing to a significant portion of the American population. Of course, Tucker Carlson can't have any of that. He's going to tell his audience what they just heard, and it will have no resemblance whatsoever to what they actually just heard with their own ears. Carlson knows his audience won't have noticed.
So to summarize the president's remarks tonight, your constitutional rights are not absolute, but in taking them away...
No, Tucker. Placing sensible restrictions on rights is not the same thing as taking them away. Pretty much nobody believes that the Second Amendment gives private citizens the right to own things like machine guns and shoulder-fired surface-to-air missiles. Just like the First Amendment doesn't give you the right to shout fire in a crowded theater or incite a mob to violence. Nobody's rights are being taken away.
We're not actually taking away your rights.
Correct. They're not actually taking them away.
We're protecting children.
That too. This is where Carlson tries to sneak one in by his editing of the clip, though. Now, I didn't watch the entire Biden speech. But I bet big money that Biden didn't propose banning AR-15 style weapons just to protect children. I'd be surprised if he didn't mention the supermarket shooting in Buffalo or the synagogue shooting in Pittsburgh that killed mostly adults. But Carlson's emotional narrative will require that Biden be speaking only about protecting children.
You might ask, am I a threat to children?
That all depends. If you own the type of weapons that will be banned, you very well might be a threat to children and adults. If not, then Biden's not talking about you, so you have nothing to worry about. Even if you do own those types of weapons, they're just going to take those. You'll still be left with all the shotguns, hunting rifles, and handguns that your little heart desires.
That question is never answered by the president.
That's because it's a stupid question, and Tucker Carlson is the only one that thinks it isn't.
The point of this, of course, is to disarm people who did not vote for Joe Biden.
There's the flat-out paranoia again. In Tucker Carlson's deluded world, or at least the one he tries to paint for his audience, the only people who own guns and the only people who are going to be disarmed, despite the fact that nobody's actually being disarmed, are the people who didn't vote for Joe Biden. Somehow the law is going to be able to identify Biden voters and exempt them. Maybe lamb's blood over the doorsill or something. Who knows?
And that is why simultaneous with this effort to recategorize the guns in your closet as felonies.
Did you miss the part where they said they wanted to do that? Yeah, I did too.
Democrats have been failing to prosecute gun crimes in our cities, where most of the crime is.
Of course, Carlson's never going to tell us exactly what he means when he says they're not prosecuting gun crimes, or provide any evidence whatsoever that that's actually true. It's actually critical to his argument that he doesn't. By simply asserting it, he can let his audience's mind run wild. They will, of course, not have noticed that he switched from talking about Democrats at the federal level to Democrats at the city level, and not even people we typically consider politicians. He's now talking about Democratic district attorneys. And they are somehow colluding with Democrats at the federal level, that they are choosing to prosecute or not prosecute based on what's going to help Democrats retain control of Congress. Again, his audience is not to think about it too hard, or they realize how stupid it sounds. He won't even attempt to offer an explanation as to what's in it for the local DAs not to prosecute gun crimes. Maybe he just expects his audience to think the murderers are a stronger voting bloc. Let's be real, though. Tucker knows what his audience is going to think when he says cities. Now, why should city people not want crimes in their own neighborhoods prosecuted as strongly as possible? Of course there's no good reason. Hell, there's not even a bad reason. The only possible reason is they're just animals, those city people. They're not like you and me. Tucker doesn't want to have to explain himself, though, or what he could possibly have meant. He just gets to toss it out there that they're not, and let his audience fill in the rest.
And if you're at all confused...
No, Tucker, we're not at all confused. We know exactly what you're doing.
...about whether the effort here is selective...
Oh, I wasn't thinking about it at all. But yes, Tucker's effort is obviously selective.
If this is enforcement only at certain people...
Nope, I wasn't wondering that either. How could any reasonable person have been wondering that after what he just said? But we have to remember that this is Tucker Carlson, and he's not about to go somewhere that makes no sense whatsoever.
You'll notice the president never mentioned the apparent federal gun felony his own son committed when he lied on a federal background form when he bought a handgun.
What? Seriously? Seriously? I literally have nothing to say. What can one say? Again, this is completely scripted. Teams of writers and all that stuff. There is zero chance that somebody didn't say, huh? How does Hunter Biden, lying on a background check for a handgun license, say anything about how selectively an assault weapons ban is going to be enforced? Of course it doesn't. The main point of mentioning it was just to say the name Hunter Biden. The mere mention of the name evokes rage in the average Fox viewer. He is, after all, the most corrupt person to have ever walked the face of the earth. The secondary point, of course, is just to stoke the us versus them paranoia, elites versus the common man. Look at the two-tier justice system. You certainly aren't going to be treated fairly.
Didn't mention that. Justice Department has completely ignored it.
Well, it is a massive conspiracy.
Instead, Biden's fellow Democrats in the House of Representatives spent the day debating ways to disarm you.
And why do I get the feeling that what he is about to say in no way is going to show that they're going to disarm you?
Americans who've committed no crime at all and want only to protect themselves and their families.
In other words, be very afraid. Because the Democrats are evil, and Tucker Carlson will twist whatever they say in the early phase of crafting a law to make it sound both evil and stupid.
Democrats plan to criminalize possession of what they're calling large-capacity ammunition feeding devices.
Yep. And all the reasonable people, people not trying to paint a picture of Democrats as being evil, who want nothing other than to control you, yeah, they'll understand what Democrats are talking about. They're talking specifically about clips or magazines, whatever you call them, that hold lots of rounds of ammunition that people are putting in their AR-15 style weapons to shoot lots of people. The language obviously might be sloppy right now, but that language will never make it in any law. Tucker Carlson doesn't care. Again, he's not interested in clarifying anything or helping bring people together so that they can make sensible gun laws. He's just stoking fear and paranoia.
That is, specifically any magazine that can hold more than 10 rounds of ammunition. Well, as it turns out, that is most magazines in the United States. Tens of millions of Americans right now have so-called high-capacity magazines in their homes. They're not militia members, they're not gun nuts, they are normal people. And the reason they have them is because most modern handguns and rifles use that type of magazine, the kind that Joe Biden is telling you is threatening and esoteric. And these same firearms, the ones in your house right now, will not accept the kind of diminished magazines Joe Biden is demanding you use. And that means, in effect, all of those guns will be banned.
And that language will never make it into law because Democrats also do not want to take people's handguns. As Tucker Carlson has so often and will continue to point out, Democrats don't know much about firearms. And once someone tells them these facts, they will adjust the language of the law. It's really as simple as that.
Which guns specifically? Well, for example, the Glock 19, probably the most popular handgun in the United States. The Glock 19 comes from the manufacturer with a 15-round magazine. Now, the Glock 19 is not an especially scary firearm. It's a workmanlike pistol. If you have any interest in guns at all, you probably already own one. But under this bill, the Glock 19 would be banned, illegal, a felony sitting in your bedside table. And so would many other popular firearms in the United States.
Which again is why this bill in this version will never become law. There are almost no Democrats who want to do that.
Now, this is about saving the children, Joe Biden just told us.
Well, at least that's what Tucker Carlson said Joe Biden just told us.
But how many lives would this new law save?
We have no idea, because Tucker Carlson only talked about one part of it. So apparently, the Democrats are writing a law that does nothing but put an upper limit on the number of rounds in magazines. Or Carlson is lying to us again. I'm guessing the latter.
Well, we know the answer. 0, not 1.
I'm guessing it's too much to ask how Tucker Carlson knows that.
We know that because there is precisely no evidence at all, and never has been, that larger magazines somehow inspire mass shootings.
And nobody ever said they did. But when you're just trying to make liberals look stupid and evil, the facts really don't matter. The restrictions on magazine capacity is supposed to reduce the ability of mass shooters to kill people fast, not to reduce their inspiration.
But of course, saving lives is not the point of this. Disarming you is the point.
And now Tucker's just doing my work for me. He just comes right out and says it, in no uncertain terms, that this is all just a ruse, a conspiracy, a con, to take all your guns. But of course, the only way he can make that point, as he is demonstrating, is by lying about the Democrats' true intentions.
Florida Congressman Greg Steube tried to explain that at a hearing today of the House Judiciary Committee. Watch how this unfolded.
Here's a gun I carry every single day to protect myself, my family, my wife, my home. Comes with a 15-round magazine. Here's a 7-round magazine, which would be less than what would be lawful under this bill if this bill were to become law. It doesn't fit.
Okay. This is admittedly a sidetrack and petty as hell. But I have to say it. Are Republicans fucking stupid? Seriously. Look at the little magazine. It doesn't stick in the big gun. Seriously, man. Is he really expecting that nobody is going to understand how easy it would be to modify that bigger magazine to hold fewer bullets? All I need is a damn spacer. Boom. 7 bullets max. Now, I personally have no idea if limiting the size of magazines on Glocks will prevent any deaths. It probably won't. I'm guessing in most cases, the first 2 or 3 bullets do the job, and you never get to the 12th. But damn, why does every Republican have to be such an idiot?
So this gun would be banned.
I hope the gun is not loaded.
I'm at my house. I can do whatever I want with my guns.
Again, we have to remember that everything that shows up in these segments is carefully planned. He has access to all the statements made during the proceedings. And of all those statements, he chose this one. Carlson didn't need to show a Republican acting like an idiot to tell his audience that magazines currently designed to hold only 7 rounds don't fit into handguns that have magazines that could hold more. He could have just as easily told them. The only reason he included this clip shows up right now.
So you heard a voice in the background. Greg Steube obviously knows his way around firearms. That was his gun. But off camera, you heard Sheila Jackson Lee of Texas interrupting Greg Steube to tell him how to handle the firearm in his own home. So is Sheila Jackson Lee a gun instructor now? What does she know about firearms? Well, glad you asked. Sheila Jackson Lee is the person who once explained to us that AR-15s shoot 50 caliber rounds and weigh more than, quote, 10 boxes, whatever that means. So Sheila Jackson Lee knows literally nothing about firearms, and yet she plans, without shame, to regulate them.
Okay, was that his real goal for including this clip? To make fun of a congresswoman? Nope, not really.
But only regulate your guns. Sheila Jackson Lee has no intention of disarming her own bodyguards, for example, or her own constituents.
And that's why Tucker Carlson included this clip. So he could say her constituents. Yeah, her constituents will not be disarmed. But what is Tucker Carlson saying to his audience when he talks about her constituents? What do we see? What do we think about her constituents? What do you think Tucker Carlson's audience is going to hear when he uses the phrase her constituents? He knows exactly what he's doing. He's telling his audience who will be armed and who will not be armed. And her constituents will be armed. You won't.
The Democrats' bill contains an explicit exemption for bodyguards.
And all reasonable people understand that there are certain jobs in this world where it makes sense for people to be armed. Private security services being one of them. It's a big deal.
Even Sheila Jackson Lee understands that the people protecting her family may need a lot more than 10 rounds.
I must have missed the part where he demonstrated that she has bodyguards, little less bodyguards that are protecting her whole family. No, Tucker Carlson just wants his audience to assume, while providing no evidence whatsoever, that she's exempting herself. He needs to blur that line. He needs his audience to believe that liberals think the common folk are lesser than they are. That we believe their lives have less worth. That's obviously not true.
And most of them carry that. As the Washington Post put it, quote, American law enforcement officers ubiquitously carry handguns with more than 10 rounds of ammunition, and often more than 15. It is also why their rifles typically have 20 or 30 round magazines, not 10.
And this just feeds into the whole sovereign citizen's paranoid narrative. If the police need to be armed and the police need high capacity weapons, then everybody needs them.
Now, why would Sheila Jackson Lee's bodyguards need all of those bullets? Why would anybody need all of those bullets, as Chuck Schumer often asks rhetorically?
Just lie after lie after lie. No, neither Chuck Schumer nor anybody has ever asked that rhetorically. Not ever. People understand why law enforcement and security need to be armed. We get that. We're not the idiots Tucker Carlson needs us to be. When Schumer and other Democrats ask that question, they're asking why private citizens need to be that heavily armed. Now, all reasonable people, all people not living in a paranoid delusion, know that it makes perfect sense to have different rules for law enforcement than everybody else. It just makes sense. It's common sense, as they say. But Tucker Carlson needs confusion. He needs to blur all lines.
And the answer, of course, is because it's a dangerous world. And if you're serious about protecting the people you love, you will be serious about the firearm you carry.
What? Really? And all this time I thought I was serious about protecting my family. And I don't even own any firearms. I must not really care. And again, we have to remember that Carlson is painting a narrative. It's a narrative in which 7 rounds and a Glock is insufficient to protect your family. We won't even mention the pump action 12 gauge that nobody's trying to take away from you, or the fact that you can own unlimited numbers of Glocks and shotguns with unlimited numbers of magazines. What kind of situation could any private citizen ever expect him or herself to be in where 7 rounds and a Glock, little less multiple Glocks and multiple magazines and multiple shotguns is insufficient for personal protection? It's not a rhetorical question, really. Think about it. Because that's the narrative Tucker Carlson is spinning. In Tucker's world, there are wild hordes roaming the streets of your neighborhood, and you need an entire arsenal to fend them off. The imminent battle is going to end with hundreds of shell casings all around you and dozens of dead bodies, none of which are your families because you barely protected them. That is what Tucker Carlson is telling his audience. He is in the business of scaring.
But it turns out, we know this for a fact now, Democrats are not serious about protecting you or your family.
Oh, fuck off, Carlson. You wouldn't know a fact if it slapped you across the face. I have to admit, I'm sometimes at a loss for how to even respond to statements like this. It turns out that we know for a fact that Democrats are killing babies and drinking their blood. What is wrong with his audience that would make them so receptive to such blatant and disgusting lies? Moreover, blatant lies about how evil half of the American population is. I'm at a loss. I don't get it.
And that's why they defunded your police and called you a racist for complaining about it as your city collapsed.
Wrong. And let me see. Wrong. Yeah, 3 wrongs. Nobody defunded any police. Nobody called anybody racist for questioning something that never happened. Nobody's city collapsed. Carlson, however, can throw that out there to his audience without any fear that they'll question him because he spent the last year or so spreading those particular lies. He, of course, just like now, never provided any evidence for any of this actually happening. At best, he showed a tweet from a backbencher, most likely a community activist who suggested that maybe it's not the best idea to send heavily armed police to handle nonviolent domestic situations, auto accidents, traffic violations, and such. They could be much better served by trained social workers. And then maybe we can have the police, with the guns, focus on violent crimes. Because that turns out to be only a fraction of what they do on a daily basis. Nothing ever came of any of that, though. It was just thought. But in Tucker's alternative world, in his paranoid narrative, there are no more police departments in any democratically controlled cities, anywhere in the country. And now all of those cities are post-apocalyptic hellscapes. After years of doing this, it's just become its own reality, where Tucker Carlson can say things that are demonstrably not true, and his audience just won't notice or care. It feeds upon itself. It builds upon itself. Finally, if they were defunding the police, which they aren't, that takes place at the city level and at the county level with regard to the sheriff. Congress has absolutely nothing to do with that. Again, Carlson knows this. It's not an accident that he talked about only Congress and then threw in defunding of the police. He knows his audience will not make the connection, or the lack of connection as the case may be.
What they care about deeply, what they care about more than anything at all.
Ooh, this should be good. Tell us, Tucker, what do we care about deeply, more than anything else at all?
Is protecting themselves.
Oh, wait, that's not right. Just more lies to make his audience hate us.
And that's why their bodyguards will continue to get any kind of magazines they want. And what they want are high-capacity magazines.
I'm pretty sure Republicans want their bodyguards to have high-capacity magazines too. And I'm pretty sure the Democrats want Republican bodyguards to have high-capacity magazines too. It might even be the case that it's not about politics at all.
Democrats spent the rest of the day trying to figure out how to ban what Joe Biden has called ghost guns. Ghost guns, they're scary.
Yes, Tucker, I'm sure that's why they call them ghost guns, to scare people. Because those non-ghost guns, nobody's afraid of those. But seriously, this is just Tucker again, not being able to resist, just being a dick.
Well, several states, it turns out, have already tried to ban ghost guns, but every state that has run into the same problem. No one can say what a ghost gun is.
Oh, I bet somebody can. But this is just Tucker again telling his audience that everybody else is stupid.
It's a made-up term. It has no meaning.
All terms are made up. They only have the meaning we give them. That's the nature of language, Tucker.
As a judge in Nevada put it late last year when he struck down a ban on so-called ghost guns, quote, Nevadans would face the risk of discriminatory enforcement by police and prosecutors alike as they, in their sole discretion and without guidance, could label almost anything an unfinished frame or receiver if it in any way resembles a firearm's undefined frame or lower receiver. In other words,
It seems to me that somebody's defining ghost guns as anything with an unfinished frame or receiver.
any gun could be a ghost gun if Democratic operatives say it is.
Wait, Democratic operatives? Of course he knows he's not making an argument. He knows there's not going to be any provision in there which allows Democratic operatives to decide what a ghost gun is. He knows that. He just wanted to say the words, Democratic operatives. Once again, he's just trying to scare his audience, get them to believe that Democrats are coming for their guns. Even the ghosty ones.
And of course, that's the way they like it. The bill before Congress defines ghost gun as a firearm, including certain firearm parts, that does not have a unique serial number engraved by a licensed manufacturer.
Wait, what happened to this?
No one can say what a ghost gun is.
And yet they just did. Unless you think Tucker Carlson forgot what he just said 10 seconds ago, he didn't. He's just creating a paranoid narrative. It doesn't have to make sense. It's actually better if it doesn't.
Okay. But the question is, which part of a firearm should require engraved serial numbers?
And I'm sure there's no way they can work that out.
That's the question. On that question hangs whether or not your possession of this object is a felony or legal. Now, according to the bill, any, quote, essential component of the firearm would require an engraved serial number. But here's the point. Merrick Garland gets to make the call. This bill grants Merrick Garland, who is a craven and ruthless partisan, we know that for a fact at this point, grants Merrick Garland the sole authority to define what an essential component is.
Oh, so that's where he was going with this all along. One might be wondering, and rightly so, why, of all the things Tucker Carlson could have talked about, he talked about ghost guns. I'll admit, I've never heard of them before. If Tucker Carlson's goal were to add clarity to the issue, to help his audience to understand the problem, he could provide some background. Why have some states tried to ban them? Why do people want them in the first place? How many people even have them, so how many people would be affected by any law regarding them? But clarification and education is not his goal. The whole purpose of even including them in this segment was so that he could utter the name Merrick Garland. That was it. That was the whole point. For those of you who don't follow right-wing media, Merrick Garland is, how did Tucker Carlson put it, a craven and ruthless partisan. You might be asking, what makes him a craven and ruthless partisan? Well, during all the COVID stuff, there was a lot of contention between parents and school board members, most of it manufactured by political operatives, around masking and in-person learning. Some parents went so far as to make threats of physical violence against school board members and their families. When other news outlets covered the story, they showed the emails and played the voicemails that had some of the most vile shit you could possibly imagine on them. Let's just say death was not the worst of the threats. Let's also keep in mind that these are just school board members. Their job during sane years was making sure schools have sufficient staffing and funding and making sure the plumbing works and the roofs don't leak in the schools. It's a rather boring job during sane years. Now they were getting death threats and worse. As a result, several board members in districts throughout the country just resigned. It's not what they signed up for. They didn't sign up for death threats. In light of this, the National School Boards Association sent a letter to the DOJ that said the threats, quote, could be the equivalent to a form of domestic terrorism, unquote, and asked the DOJ to look into them because local police refused. The DOJ agreed to look into it, but no Fox viewer would have ever known any of that. In the Fox News universe, those threats simply didn't exist. During this time, though, there were also very contentious school board meetings where parents were shouting their disagreements regarding mask policies and in-person learning at school board members. Fox, of course, gladly showed the parents shouting because they could frame that as righteous anger, parents demanding that teachers do the jobs they were paying them for. That part, of course, was fine. They had the right to do that. The disgusting part is that Tucker said that those were the parents the DOJ was looking at. The threats of violence didn't exist. So if the DOJ was looking into anybody, it could only be the screaming parents. They were the ones being targeted in the Fox world for nothing more than challenging Democrats' narrative around COVID precautions. In addition to that, there was the time when Garland suggested that white supremacists were a domestic security concern. Tucker framed that, of course, much like this, as Democrats coming for the guns of honest, hardworking Americans. There's a couple other instances in which Tucker has lied about both what Garland and the DOJ have done and the motivations behind those actions, but it all adds up to Merrick Garland being a craven and ruthless partisan. So again, the only purpose for even mentioning ghost guns was so that Tucker Carlson could add one more brick to that wall of lies. And of course the legislation will not contain Merrick Garland's name anywhere in it. If the final version says anything about who decides what these ghost gun things are, it will be the Attorney General. Reasonable people know Merrick Garland will not be Attorney General forever. Historically, they don't last more than a term or so. So by the time this law goes into effect, Merrick Garland will probably not even be Attorney General, but Carlson has confidence that his audience won't think about that too hard. They'll just think, Merrick Garland. That will be enough to evoke all the rage and paranoia that Tucker Carlson needs.
And if Merrick Garland decides you've got a, quote, essential component that does not have an engraved serial number, you're going to jail.
No, you're not. Again, Carlson doesn't want his audience to think too hard about how anybody is going to find out that you have a gun without a serial number. He just wants his audience to feel like if this law is passed, Merrick Garland personally will be searching everybody's house, probably with no-knock warrants, and walking good, hardworking Americans out in shackles. There is, of course, zero chance of that happening, and Tucker knows it. He knows all of this. He's just trying to make his audience afraid.
See how this works?
I unfortunately do. It's just too bad Tucker Carlson's audience doesn't.
So once again, the point is not to stop school shootings. There's never been a school shooting with a so-called ghost gun.
Well, there couldn't be, since apparently nobody can define what it even is.
If you were interested in stopping school shootings, and all of us should be, you would take a serious look at why they happen in the first place. What do the people who commit them have in common?
Good idea. Now, if there were only somebody who had a nightly show with nearly unlimited resources, who actually cared about school shootings, who could maybe do a show or two on it. If there were only somebody who could do that.
But no one in Congress, particularly on the Democratic side, is doing that.
And nobody on Fox News either. How odd.
So this isn't an attempt to stop school shootings. It's not an attempt to make this a safer country. This is exactly what it looks like. The beginning of a plan to confiscate and criminalize firearms in the hands of the law-abiding in this country.
Again, Carlson knows he didn't make that case. He knows the evidence he presented doesn't support anything he actually said. He knows he can't point to a single piece of legislation where anybody's trying to take away anybody's Glocks or hunting rifles or shotguns. He's just counting on his audience not to know that.
And if you doubt that, know that Nancy Pelosi has already announced she's going to introduce legislation banning so-called assault weapons next week. Oh, assault weapons. What's an assault weapon? Any gun that Nancy Pelosi's bodyguards have that you should not be allowed to have.
I wonder if Tucker will bet me that that will not be the language in the law. Just more stoking the paranoia. Us versus them.
And there's also a new, quote, red flag law in progress. Now, that law would allow the government to seize firearms from anybody it wants, whether or not they committed a crime.
He knows that's not true.
Now, under our current system, you have to be convicted in order to be punished. But under the red flag laws, if someone doesn't like the cut of your jib, you lose your constitutional rights.
Tucker knows that's not what red flag laws are. He's not stupid. He's not even a conspiracy theorist. He just plays one on TV.
Now, that's baldly unconstitutional. And you know it is because Democrats are suddenly talking about packing the Supreme Court in order to make it law. Watch.
You will not stop us from advancing the Protecting Our Kids Act today. You will not stop us from passing it in the House next week, and you will not stop us there. If the filibuster obstructs us, we will abolish it. If the Supreme Court objects, we will expand it, and we will not rest until we have taken weapons of war out of circulation in our communities. Each and every day, we will do whatever it takes to end gun violence, whatever it takes.
In our communities. Really, what's the murder rate in your community, pal? And what exactly have you done to make it better?
Here we go again. What do you think Tucker Carlson is saying to his audience about the congressman's community? What could he possibly be saying about the congressman's community? What might that congressman's community look like? Don't know. But seriously, Tucker, what do you think he should be doing to reduce the murder rate in his community? Any suggestions? Maybe that's coming right up. Let's see.
Nothing. Mondaire Jones wants power.
Well, guess not. Just a tired, they want power for someone on Regent shtick.
They all do. And to that end, he wants to end the filibuster, destroy the entire judiciary, to, quote, end gun violence.
Well, ending the filibuster would be a good thing. And I didn't hear him say anything about destroying the entire judiciary, though. I guess Tucker's just exaggerating slightly. You know, he's got to scare his audience.
A move like that raises a lot of questions. For example, does Mondaire Jones have any idea what he's talking about? Like the details, because you're a lawmaker. Fox's Hillary Vaughn caught up with him today. She wanted to know what weapons of war he intends to ban. This is a revealing exchange. Watch this. Here's what he said.
Yep, it's very revealing. Just not in a good way for Tucker.
You mentioned you want weapons of war out of circulation. What is a weapon of war to you?
Assault weapons. Assault weapons.
So is that like semi-automatic handguns and rifles?
Semi-automatic weapons would qualify as assault weapons. And these are things that should be banned.
Almost take almost every gun out of people's hands. I mean,
True. I mean, handguns, for example, would not qualify under what I just described. I'm sorry, I gotta go.
So yes, Mondaire Jones just explained, yeah, all semi-automatic weapons, to which Hillary Vaughn says, yeah, handguns. So you want to take everyone's handguns away? No, handguns wouldn't qualify as assault weapons. Even though he just defined assault weapons as any, quote, semi-automatic weapon.
This is the bizarre thing that almost defies analysis, at least my analysis. Tucker plays a clip in which the reporter tries to, actually, I'm not sure what she's trying to do. She gives the impression, like Carlson, that she's trying to get clarification from Congressman Jones, but that's clearly not what she's doing. If she were, she'd just ask if the final bill will include a ban on handguns. He would have said no, and she would have thanked him for the clarification, and that would have been pretty much it. She seemed to be going for a kind of gotcha, though, or maybe to make him look stupid. I don't know. I can't for the life of me figure out why she's doing what she's doing. Let's watch again.
what is a weapon of war to you?
Assault weapons. Assault weapons.
So, everybody who's not been living under a rock for the last century knows exactly what Congressman Jones has in mind. The reporter knows exactly what he has in mind. Yet she throws in this.
So is that like semi-automatic handguns and rifles?
No, it's not like semi-automatic handguns. She knows that. Again, I can't even begin to think what she's getting out of this.
Semi-automatic weapons would qualify as assault weapons.
Clearly, he didn't hear her throw in handguns. His problem right here is that he's thinking the reporter is asking honest questions, and thus he's not on high alert watching out for gotchas or whatever the hell she's doing. I guess he just doesn't have much experience dealing with Fox News.
Almost take almost every gun off of...
And at this point, he finally realizes what he's dealing with. I can only assume he's wishing he had Luther, Obama's English translator, right now.
out of people's hands. I mean,
True. I mean, handguns, for example, would not qualify under what?
So, he has clearly stated his intent. All reasonable people know he's talking about AR-15 style weapons and not handguns. All reasonable people will understand that any language in the bill that would outlaw handguns will be changed so as to not outlaw them. That's what all reasonable people understand. But Tucker doesn't want to argue against Democrats' actual positions, and he does everything he can to make sure his audience doesn't even know what they are. No, Tucker needs Democrats to be power-hungry idiots. That's why Tucker takes this.
what is a weapon of war to you?
Assault weapons. Assault weapons.
So is that like semi-automatic handguns and rifles?
Semi-automatic weapons would qualify as assault weapons.
And twists it into this.
Yeah, all semi-automatic weapons, to which Hillary Vaughn says, yeah, handguns.
Nope.
Semi-automatic weapons.
Not.
Yeah, handguns.
No, not fucking handguns. Damn. This perfectly encapsulates everything that is wrong with Tucker Carlson. Carlson could address the actual differences of opinion. He could put forth Jones's position, as Jones would put it forth, He could say that Jones wants to ban AR-15 style weapons, and that would be a bad thing for America because of X, Y, and Z. He could, if he were interested in making a reasonable argument. But again, confusion is the goal. He needs to paint Democrats as incompetent, that they don't understand anything that they're legislating, while simultaneously evil. They're coming for your guns. Ignore the fact that the two accusations are contradictory. If they don't realize that handguns are semiotic weapons, they can't be secretly trying to ban them by including all semiotic weapons in the language. If they are secretly trying to ban them by including them in the language, they're not ignorant about the firearms. They can't both be true. He's just pretty confident his audience won't realize that. But it will be enough to scare them, to keep them watching.
So clearly Mondaire Jones knows what Hillary Vaughn was trying to tell him, that most firearms in this country, including most handguns, are, quote, semi-automatic weapons.
So, lie about what he actually said to stoke the conspiracy.
Including they'll have 22 calibers that aren't causing a ton of school shootings. But when Hillary Vaughn points this out, Mondaire Jones runs away.
Or he just realized he's a dishonest fuck.
Probably not back to his district to lower the murder rate.
Gotta have the dog whistles. Again, Carlson, if you have any ideas about how to lower the murder rates anywhere, you could share them in one of your segments. Maybe even offer solutions, instead of just calling everybody else stupid and evil.
He just didn't want to get into details.
Or again, he just realized there's no point. Fox News would just twist whatever he said into whatever reinforces their paranoid narrative.
So what are we looking at here? Well, today, a guy on Twitter called Spike Cohen summed it up pretty nicely. Here's what he wrote, quote, "The U.S. government has been arming Ukraine because they're allies. The U.S. government has been seeking to disarm Russia because they're opponents. In totally unrelated news, the U.S. government seeks to disarm you."
Seriously, Tucker? You have to revert to randos on Twitter to lie for you now? It's just amazing how the right can't seem to make a single point without lying. The U.S. isn't trying to disarm Russia. They aren't trying to disarm Americans. The U.S. government is not your enemy. They are not coming after you. I get that Tucker Carlson needs you to believe that. He needs you angry and afraid so you'll watch a show and possibly buy more of the crap his advertisers are peddling, like The Kid's Guide to President Trump. Yeah, that's a real thing. And more My Pillows, of course.
Well, exactly. That's the framing. That's the truth.
Truth? Seriously?
Anyone who tries to disarm you, by definition, considers you an enemy.
Yep. And that's why Tucker needs to lie to his audience that Democrats are coming to disarm them. Again, he's just pushing the big conspiracy. First they come for your guns, and then they put you in chains.
That's what you do to your enemies. You disarm them. Your friends, your allies, your children, people you love, why would you want to prevent them from defending themselves? You never would.
Again, the unlimited pump-action shotguns, hunting rifles, handguns, even if they have been modified to only hold 7 rounds, are not enough to defend you against the roving hordes that will be out your door any minute now. Without AR-15 style weapons and ghost guns, whatever those are, you're absolutely defenseless. Just like the government wants you to be. Be very afraid.
You certainly wouldn't scream at them from the podium about how they're killing children if they want to protect their own families. That's what you do to your enemies.
Enemies, enemies, enemies. Enemies everywhere. Be very afraid.
And yet somehow, a lot of Republicans, particularly in leadership, Mitch McConnell specifically, but a lot of others, Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, don't seem to understand this, or maybe they do.
Yep. The Republicans are in on it too. You have to remember, they're all just lizard people anyways, trying to subjugate the entire human race. It's a cookbook. But seriously, that's how it ended. At least the YouTube version that I could download for fair use purposes. To recap, Joe Biden is desperate. So he's going to take your guns because you didn't vote for him. Democrats don't really care about anybody's safety though, because they haven't ended murder in cities. You can tell they're only going to take guns away from Biden's voters because Hunter Biden wasn't prosecuted for lying on a background check when applying for a handgun license. Democrats are so stupid they don't know a lot of guns hold more than 7 bullets, but But they're going to include that language in the bill so that they can take those guns away and throw you in jail for having them. Democrats don't care about children. They are just using it as a ruse to take away your guns. Magazines only fit the guns in which they were designed to fit. The little ones just fall out. Democrats believe that police and security services have a need to be more heavily armed than regular citizens. If you care about the people you love, you will have weapons that can hold a lot of bullets. They're going to ban ghost guns, which could be any gun because nobody knows what they are. Merrick Garland is evil and he wants to throw all white people, well, all white Republicans in jail. Black men want to destroy the government to get power. Black people are violent and their black congressional representatives aren't doing anything about it. And again, Democrats don't know anything about firearms, but they're going to sneak in language, take them all away. People on Twitter make stupid statements too. The US government is trying to disarm Tucker's audience because they consider them an enemy, and Republicans are in it. That's pretty much the segment. Conclusion, be very afraid. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe and all that kind of stuff.